used a razor for many of the foams to cut them, or scissors, or a knife, depending on how thick it was or whether it was cardboard or foam. And in some cases, I also had to carve the pieces into curved shapes for say my knees, or there was another piece, but I can't remember it. The best example is on my knees. There is a curved piece right in front. I used a razor to cut out the general shape from the block of foam that I would have, and then I would use a grinder to sand out the middle of the piece and then the outside of the edges so that it was curved. I also set it on an angle on the piece it's attached to so that it adds to the effect of looking curved. We used a belt sander as well for large pieces that only had to be rounded on the outside but were very thick. The fuel tanks here were several layers thick of styrofoam that were just glued together, and then we carved out the shape of the fuel tank with the belt sander. I also used a razor to curve some of the pieces, which just had to have a little bit of curve to them and basically are hollow otherwise. So they couldn't be cut down too far. There was really no room for mistakes on those pieces. After cutting out and carving all the pieces from the foam or cardboard as needed, I would glue them with hot glue. I used hot glue because I'm not leaving my costume anywhere where the hot glue can possibly melt. If I lived in Las Vegas, that might still be a problem. But as it is, hot glue worked really well for me. When I had to glue certain pieces to my body while I was wearing the shirt or pants or whatever, I would often use several layers of paper. I would basically wrap it around my arm or leg, whatever I was gluing, and then I would have the clothing on top, and this would insulate me a little bit from the heat of the hot glue, and it would make sure that the glue didn't seep through the clothing and attach itself to my skin. Obviously this is a cheap way to do this. It works very effectively. And while each piece was being glued, and usually right after it was cut out, I would paint it the color it needed to be. And at the very end of the project was when I added all the details, such as the stripes that would be on the helicopter blades, the name of the pilot on the side of the cockpit of the helicopter, different designs that needed to be on pieces on the legs or whatever, were all painted on at the very end. While building the project, as I mentioned, when you're designing it, you need to consider how mobile you want to be and whatever, and when you're picking the materials, you need to figure out what stress it's going to be under. Well, it doesn't mean anything unless you actually test it out. So when building it, I often would test it out. Many of the pieces turned out just fine. I used several triangular gussets in the backpack to reinforce that because it had a lot of weight on it. I also used double thick cardboard for that. It's very sturdy. It's not going anywhere, but it's also not very storageable anyway. It would not be good for me to take anywhere long distance because it would be hard to pack. And after all of these things were done, my costume was pretty much complete. The only thing it was missing was the character itself. I can dress up like the character, but it doesn't mean anything if I'm talking like I am now, because I don't sound like Grindor or Blackout. But I have been working on a voice, and it's very convincing, I hear. So, if I were to be in costume, I would be using the character's voice,
which sounds like this. Of course, it always has to be a bit louder, because I can't speak in it quietly. Anyway,
after getting the voice down, just seeing people's faces light up like that is very cool. That's one of the reasons to build a costume, because not only do you enjoy making it and being in it, but you get to see how other people react as well, especially when they recognize you. Um, Personally, I'm planning on wearing my costume to Halloween parties. I've never been to a convention before, but I might this fall, depending on budgeting, how that works. And finally, I've only gone over one way to build one of these costumes. At the beginning of the speech, when I showed you all those pictures, they were all made out of different materials and they were made using different techniques. There are a million different ways to make a costume, and that can be provided for you on the Trans Costumers Board, which I visit and am a member of now. They are very helpful and can get you started in the right direction, basically. So I hope with all of this I've proven that it is possible, with a small budget and the appropriate experience and a plan, to make a costume look good and make it look real and robotic and robust. Thank you very much.